Can you imagine a small mistake can lost you all thing? Like your whole world collapsing in slow motion while you just stand there watching everything you built scatter like ashes in the wind? That's not a nightmare. That's my reality. And even now, when I replay it in my head, it feels like a punch straight to the gut. It all started on a morning that looked too calm to be real. The kind of morning where you think the universe is smiling at you, when in reality, it's just loading up the next blow. I woke up in my $50 million mansion, the crown jewel of my entire life's grind, with sunlight sliding over marble floors, the kind of luxury I used to dream about back when I slept on old couches and worked double shifts just to survive. People don't understand what it takes to climb from nothing to everything. It's not luck, it's pain layered on top of pain until one day it turns into success. But that morning, while life looked perfect, something was already off. A quiet kind of wrong I didn't recognize yet. My wife walked into the room, and I swear I could tell from her first step something was brewing in her mind. She had this forced sparkle in her eyes, like she was trying too hard to act excited, like she was selling the idea to herself before she even sold it to me. She sat down in front of me and told me she found an opportunity, her voice all bright and breathless. An investment that would flip our fortune into something even bigger, something she claimed was too good to miss. She talked fast, like someone running from the truth, and the more she spoke, the tighter my chest felt. She mentioned a man, some so-called financial genius she barely knew. And the moment his name left her mouth, I felt a cold, sharp twist in my gut that I couldn't explain. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was experience, maybe it was the universe trying to warn me, but everything inside me said don't trust this. I told her it sounded sketchy, told her we didn't need more money, told her we had built enough to live the rest of our lives in peace. But she pushed back harder than I expected, saying she felt useless, saying she wanted to prove she could contribute, saying she was tired of living in the shadow of my accomplishments. And damn, hearing that stung deeper than I wanted to admit. I never wanted her to feel like a side character in my story. She was the woman I loved, the person I shared my success with, the one I trusted more than anyone. So instead of standing firm, instead of following my instincts, I let my guard drop. She cried, real tears, and begged me to believe in her just once. She promised she checked everything, said the guy was legit, said this was our chance to grow, not lose. And in that moment, love made me blind, made me stupid, made me vulnerable. I caved. I agreed. And that was the exact second the ground beneath my life started cracking. What I didn't know was that behind her hopeful words and innocent intentions, the man she trusted was nothing but a polished predator. A smooth-talking wolf who made a living out of draining families dry. A scammer dressed like success. A thief hiding behind fancy numbers and fake confidence. While I believed I was supporting my wife, he was already setting the trap, already calculating how to take everything from us. That morning felt normal on the outside, but it was the beginning of the end. Days later, papers were signed. Weeks later, accounts started shifting. Months later, the whole empire I built began slipping through my fingers without me even realizing the damage until it was too late. And by the time I understood what had happened, the house I worked 4 decades to build wasn't even mine anymore. My life was being auctioned off piece by piece, and all I could do was watch. And the craziest part? The saddest part? The part that still hurts the most. None of it would have happened if I had just trusted my instincts instead of trying to protect her feelings. That one mistake, her choice and my silence, destroyed everything. Welcome to the story, folks. And before we dive into this mess that cracked my whole life open, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And if this story hits you even a little, make sure you subscribe and smash that bell, because what I'm about to share is the kind of real-life nightmare nobody thinks will ever happen to them until their whole world blows up overnight. The crazy thing about life falling apart is that you never see the first cracks until they're so wide you can damn near fall through them. And that's exactly how it started for me. After my wife convinced me to trust that so-called investment genius, I tried to shake off the bad feeling in my stomach and pretend everything was normal, like maybe I was just overreacting or being too protective because I'd spent years guarding our money like a lion guards its territory. For the next few days, things were calm. Too calm. The kind of quiet that feels like the world holding its breath. My wife walked around the house acting lighter, happier, almost proud, as if she finally had something that was truly her own, something she could point to and say, I did this. I didn't want to ruin her moment, so I pushed my doubts down so deep they practically hit the floor. But the truth is, deep inside, something felt wrong. The man she trusted kept sending sweet, polished messages, smooth words, fake confidence, calculated charm, but not once did he ever speak to me directly. That alone should have told me everything. A real businessman looks the other man in the eyes. A scammer avoids the one who can expose him. But I let it slide, telling myself not to create drama. Days rolled into weeks, and every time I asked my wife for an update, she brushed it off with this weird new confidence, like she knew something I didn't. She even started talking about future plans, vacation homes, charity events, maybe even opening a business with the returns she swore were coming. Hearing her dream like that almost made me believe her, almost made me think maybe I had misjudged everything. But then strange little things started happening. Random emails from the bank that didn't make sense, minor account changes she claimed were normal, and calls from unknown numbers that she answered quicker than she answered mine. Every time I asked too many questions, she snapped at me, saying I didn't trust her, saying I was trying to control everything again. And I swear, watching the woman you love turn defensive over something you already feel scared about is one of the worst feelings in the world. Still, I tried to hold things together, tried to give her the space she said she needed. But the more I pulled back, the more the world felt like it was quietly shifting, like invisible hands were rearranging the pieces of my life while I was looking the other way. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to find her sitting in the living room with the lights off, staring at her phone, her face pale like she'd just seen a ghost. When I asked what was wrong, she jumped like I scared her out of her skin, then claimed she was just checking something. But she didn't sleep the rest of the night. I could hear her breathing, fast, shaky, like she was trying not to break. The next morning, she acted totally normal, overcompensating with a fake smile and too much coffee, but I knew something was off. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just hiding details. She was hiding fear. And fear means something has gone wrong. I didn't push her right away, but the uneasiness kept building inside me like a storm tightening in my chest. A few days later, the first real sign hit. A letter from the bank marked urgent. My wife grabbed it before I could open it and said it was nothing important, but her hands were shaking. That's when I hit the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. I asked her, straight up, what was going on. She tried to dodge, tried to spin the conversation, tried to guilt me into backing off, but this time I wasn't moving. Her voice cracked. Her eyes filled. And for the first time since the whole thing started, she told me something she should have told me weeks earlier. The investor had stopped responding. No messages. No updates. No confirmations. Nothing. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something inside me drop, like the floor of my soul just opened and swallowed the air around me. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't blame. I just stared at her, feeling the weight of a disaster I could sense was only beginning. Because when a scammer disappears, they don't just run off with your money, they run off with your future. And I knew, deep down, this was the moment everything was about to start unraveling, thread by thread, until nothing was left. The moment my wife told me the investor had suddenly gone silent, it felt like someone grabbed my spine and snapped it in half, but I still tried to hold myself together because falling apart right then wouldn't fix anything. Instead, I took a deep breath, looked her in the eye, and told her we needed to contact the bank immediately. She nodded, but the way her shoulders were trembling made the dread in my stomach twist even deeper. There's a special kind of fear that comes when you start realizing your life might be slipping out of your hands, slowly, quietly, like sand leaking through a crack you didn't know was there, and that's exactly what I felt as we walked into the bank the next morning. The second we sat down with the manager, I could tell something was wrong. He stared at the screen a little too long, clicked a little too many times, his eyebrows pulling tighter with each second. Then he turned the monitor slightly away from us, and that's when my heart dropped so hard I swear I heard it hit the floor. He told us there were unexpected transfers, large amounts moved into accounts we didn't authorize, and when I looked at my wife, her face went white like she'd just been hit by a truck. She tried to explain that the investor needed access for the planned returns, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. The manager cleared his throat, his voice suddenly cautious, and said the words I prayed I would never hear. These transfers appear to be part of a fraudulent activity. My wife gasped like someone ripped the air out of her lungs, and I felt this sharp heat rise in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just the sickening realization that the life I built was now sitting on a cliff edge ready to fall. We rushed home, and for the first time in years, the mansion didn't feel like a safe place. It felt like a giant empty box with walls closing in. I paced the living room while my wife cried quietly on the couch, her hands shaking so bad she could barely hold her phone. I kept replaying every warning sign I ignored, every instinct I shoved aside, every moment I chose to protect her feelings instead of protecting our future. It's crazy how one decision can slap your entire life backward. We tried calling the investor, messaging, emailing, nothing. His number was dead. His website was gone. His office address redirected to an empty building. That's when reality hit us like a brick to the face. We'd been scammed by a ghost. But the nightmare didn't stop there. 2 days later, we got another letter. This one even worse than the first. It showed withdrawals we never approved, mortgages we didn't sign, debts we didn't know existed. And the numbers were so big it made my head spin. I confronted my wife, not to hurt her, not to blame her, but because I needed the truth. And that's when she broke down completely. Through choked sobs, she confessed that she had given the investor more access than she originally told me. Way more. And she had done it thinking the returns would surprise me, make me proud of her, make her feel equal in our marriage. I felt like my soul cracked. I didn't yell at her. I didn't hit the wall. I didn't storm out. I just sat there, feeling the weight of everything pressed down on me like a collapsing building. I realized she wasn't trying to ruin us. She was trying to impress me, trying to finally feel like she wasn't just living in the shadow of my success. And the messed up part? Her insecurity, mixed with my blind trust, became the perfect recipe for destruction. Within a week, lawyers got involved. The bank froze our accounts. The mansion was put under investigation, and people who used to smile at me suddenly treated me like I was invisible. It was like society flipped a switch. One moment, I was a respected millionaire. The next, I was just a clueless old man who should have known better. And watching my wife crumble under the pressure, watching her lose sleep, lose weight, lose herself, that hurt almost as much as losing the money. Every night she whispered apologies, saying she didn't mean for this to happen, saying she was stupid, saying she ruined everything. And no matter how broken I felt, I couldn't bring myself to hate her because I knew her mistake came from wanting to be valued, not from greed. But love doesn't stop consequences, and the consequences were stacking up like a mountain ready to bury us alive. I could feel it deep in my bones. This wasn't the end of the fall. This was just the start. Something bigger, darker, and more devastating was coming, and I had no clue how to stop it. The night felt heavier than usual, like the sky itself was pressing down on the house, squeezing every whisper into silence. Lyra sat alone on the edge of the guest room bed, fingers tangled in her hair, replaying every moment from the past days like a broken projector, her mother's trembling voice on the phone, the strange man who kept appearing and disappearing like a shadow that understood her better than she understood herself, and the growing suspicion that her father's old diary held secrets she was never meant to uncover. For a long moment she didn't move. She barely breathed. The only sound was the soft ticking of the wall clock, painfully slow, like time itself was afraid to move forward. She finally stood, grabbed the diary from the bedside table, and flipped to the page she had been avoiding. The page with her father's handwriting that didn't look like his usual rushed, messy scribbles. This one was neat, controlled, almost too steady, as if someone guided his hand. If she ever finds this, tell her to stay away from the river house. Stay away from the man with the silver ring. He is not who he pretends to be. Lyra's stomach dropped. The river house was the same place the stranger mentioned in part 3, the place he said she needed to visit before they find you. And the silver ring, she remembered clearly. He wore it on his right hand, engraved with a symbol she couldn't recognize. She felt her heartbeat rise, loud enough that she pressed a hand to her chest. Why would her father warn her about a man she had met only recently? How could he have known? Before she could think deeper, a soft knock echoed from the hallway. Not loud, not urgent, but slow, deliberate, like someone was waiting for her reaction. She froze. Another knock. Then silence. "Mom?" she whispered, though she already felt it wasn't her mother. Her mother never knocked this softly, this slowly. Lyra took a few steps toward the door, her bare feet cold against the tiled floor. The doorknob began to turn on its own, slowly, quietly, like a hand was twisting it with practiced patience. Lyra backed up instantly, looking around for anything she could use as a weapon. Her eyes landed on the floor lamp. Tall, metal, heavy. She grabbed it, holding it like a bat. The door didn't open fully. It cracked just an inch. Then she heard it. "Lyra," whispered the familiar voice. Calm, deep, too close. It was him, the man with the silver ring. Her grip tightened around the lamp. "How did you get inside the house?" she demanded. He didn't answer. Instead, the door opened wider, revealing nothing but the empty hallway. No man, no shadow, just silence. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She stepped into the hallway cautiously, eyes darting left and right. Then she heard his voice again, this time behind her. "You shouldn't have opened the diary." She spun around, swinging the lamp with all her strength, but it sliced through nothing but air. He wasn't there. The voice felt like it came from everywhere. The walls, the floor. Inside her head, Lyra stumbled backward until her shoulder hit the wall. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to force calm into her lungs, but the voice kept coming, softer now, coaxing. "You need to come to the river house. It's the only place you'll get answers." "Why me?" she whispered. No reply. Only a chilling rush of cold air sweeping down the hallway, as if someone had walked right past her. She ran to her mother's room. But when she pushed open the door, the bed was empty. The blankets tossed aside. The window slightly open even though her mother always kept it locked. A sinking dread spread through Lyra's chest. She rushed to the window, peering outside into the dim backyard. A figure stood near the old fig tree, tall, still, and unmistakably the man with the silver ring. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking toward the forest that led to the river. And next to him was her mother, standing like she was sleepwalking, eyes half open, face pale, her body swaying slightly. Lyra's breath shattered. "Mom!" she yelled, smashing her hand against the glass. Neither of them reacted, not even a flinch. The man slowly lifted his hand and pointed toward the forest path, as if motioning them to follow. Then, with one blink, he was gone, disappeared into thin air. Her mother turned slowly and began walking toward the forest, as if under a spell. "Mom, stop!" Lyra cried, scrambling out of the room and racing down the stairs. She burst through the back door, the night air cold against her skin. Her mother was already halfway down the path, moving mechanically. Lyra ran after her, feet pounding the dirt, branches scraping her arms as she pushed through the foliage. The forest grew darker the deeper she went. The trees seemed too tall, too silent. The air felt wrong, thick, buzzing with something she couldn't explain. Her mother didn't slow down, didn't turn, didn't speak. She just kept walking toward the faint glow in the distance. The river house. Lyra could now see its outline. A small wooden cabin, light flickering through its windows like a heartbeat. "Mom, please!" Lyra shouted again, grabbing her arm. But her mother turned to her with a blank, glassy stare, and whispered, in a voice that wasn't hers, "You were supposed to come alone." Lyra stepped back, horrified. Before she could speak, the door of the river house creaked open by itself, and the man with the silver ring finally stepped out, smiling like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. Lyra's heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of her chest, but she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly as the man with the silver ring stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the flickering lights of the river house. His eyes were cold, calculating, like he had seen every step she was about to take before she even thought it, and a shiver ran down her spine because she realized she was completely out of control. Her mother still stood there, pale, unmoving, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by some invisible hand, and Lyra felt a surge of panic she couldn't contain. Who are you?" she finally managed to whisper, her voice cracking under the weight of fear. The man smiled, slow, almost deliberately, as if savoring every second of her terror. I'm someone who's been waiting a long time for this, he said, his tone smooth, dangerous, like oil sliding across a razor blade. You shouldn't have come here. You weren't supposed to follow. Lyra's mind raced, trying to piece together what he meant. How did he know she was coming? How did he know she saw the diary? How could her father's warning be connected to him in ways she didn't yet understand? She glanced at her mother, still frozen, and then back at the man. He took a step closer, and the air seemed to thicken around them, like gravity itself was heavier in that spot. Lyra backed up instinctively, but her feet tangled in the forest roots, sending her stumbling forward, and the man's shadow loomed even larger, swallowing the light. He reached out a hand, not to grab, not yet, just to point at something behind her. She spun around, heart leaping, but there was nothing there except darkness, the trees swaying faintly in the wind. When she turned back, he was closer. His voice came again, low, almost a whisper but cutting through the night. You have to understand, your family has secrets deeper than you realize, and every step you take now matters. One wrong move, and everything ends. Lyra swallowed hard, her throat dry, eyes wide, body frozen with terror and disbelief. Secrets? Secrets. She had grown up thinking everything about her parents, her father, their past, but the diary, the warning, the way her mother was acting now. It was like peeling back a layer of reality she had never even imagined existed. Why my mom? She asked, her voice shaking. Why is she like this? The man tilted his head slightly, expression unreadable. She made a choice she thought would protect you. Now it's up to you to fix what she couldn't. But beware, every decision has consequences you aren't ready for. Lyra's hands trembled, and she could feel herself breaking inside. The river house, the forest, the man, the diary, it all swirled together like a storm she couldn't escape. She tried to speak again, but words caught in her throat. The man sighed, a slow exhale that seemed to carry the weight of years, and then said, almost casually, you need to follow the path to the river, past the old bridge. There you'll find what you need if you're brave enough. Lyra wanted to refuse, to run, to scream, but something in his voice, a promise, a threat, she couldn't tell, made her legs move. She glanced back at her mother, whose blank stare finally flickered with a hint of recognition, almost like a spark struggling to light a fire. The man stepped aside, letting her pass, and for a moment, she thought she saw a shadow of a smile on his lips, cruel but almost respectful, as if he acknowledged her courage even as he tested it. The forest around her seemed alive now, the wind whispering in ways she couldn't understand, branches snapping underfoot, the river ahead faintly glowing with moonlight reflecting off the water. Her heart raced, and every step forward was like walking on glass, sharp and uncertain. She thought of her father's words again, about staying away, about the man with the silver ring. But now it was too late. She was already here, already walking the path he wanted her to take. Her mind screamed to turn back, to run home, to grab her mother and flee. But a strange force, something she couldn't name, pushed her forward, compelling her toward answers she didn't know she was ready for. And then, just as she reached the clearing before the river, the wind shifted, carrying a faint, almost imperceptible whisper of a voice. She recognized her father's voice, warning her again, chilling, urgent, clear. Trust no one, not even those closest to you. Lyra's knees buckled slightly, but she stood tall, gripping the diary against her chest, feeling the weight of generations, of mistakes, of secrets, pressing down on her like a mountain she had to climb. She looked at the river, the faint glow reflecting in the dark, and realized this was a point of no return. Every step she had taken, every choice her parents made, every lie and truth she had uncovered, had led her to this exact moment. The man with the silver ring had disappeared again, leaving her alone with the river, the diary, and a decision that could change everything, or destroy everything. Lyra inhaled sharply, swallowed her fear, and stepped forward, ready to face whatever waited in the shadows, knowing that once she crossed that riverbank, there was no turning back. The river's edge felt colder than Lyra expected, the water dark and churning like it was alive, whispering secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. But she couldn't stop now, not after everything she had seen, not after her father's warnings, not after the man with the silver ring had disappeared like smoke into the night. Her feet sank slightly into the muddy shore, each step making a soft sucking sound that echoed far too loudly in the otherwise silent forest, and she gripped the diary tighter, feeling the leather press into her palms like it was the only anchor keeping her from falling into panic. The wind picked up, rustling the trees above, making shadows dance across the river's surface, and for a moment, she could have sworn she saw figures moving just beneath the water, dark silhouettes gliding with intent, watching her, waiting. Her heart hammered, sweat prickling along her spine, but she forced herself to keep moving, eyes locked on the faint glow coming from the other side of the river, where the river house seemed to expand into some kind of portal, light flickering in ways that didn't make sense. "Stay calm," she muttered. Under her breath, voice shaking, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Every nerve in her body screamed danger, yet curiosity, stubbornness, and maybe a reckless kind of bravery kept her legs moving forward. She reached the old wooden bridge her father's diary had mentioned, the boards creaking under her weight, some so rotten she had to step carefully or risk plunging into the icy water below. As she crossed, she felt a pull, like invisible hands trying to drag her back, whispering her name in voices she couldn't identify, some familiar, some strange, almost mocking, and she shivered violently but pressed on, ignoring the instinct to run. On the far side, the glow grew stronger, revealing more of the river house than she had seen from the forest. The windows flickered with candlelight, shadows moving behind the glass, and suddenly the sense of being watched intensified so sharply she stopped dead in her tracks, scanning the edges of the clearing. That's when she noticed the footprints, fresh, wet, and deep, leading from the river up to the house. Someone had been here, someone had been waiting for her, maybe following her mother, maybe tracking her every step. The hair on her arms stood on end. She wanted to call out, to scream, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she took a cautious step forward, then another, each one measured, deliberate, like a tightrope walk over invisible death traps. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke, faint but undeniable, like a warning burned into the wind, and the rustling in the trees sounded less like natural movement and more like hushed voices conspiring just out of sight. Lyra's breath came in shallow bursts as she approached the front door, the faint flicker of candlelight casting eerie, dancing shapes on the walls inside. She could feel the weight of the diary pressing against her chest, almost as if it were alive, pulsing with urgency, demanding that she act, that she open the door, that she confront whatever waited on the other side. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, cold metal biting into her palm, and for a fleeting second she considered running, screaming, throwing herself back across the bridge and into the dark embrace of the forest. But then she remembered her mother, her father's warning, the man with the silver ring, and the countless choices that had led her here. Every instinct told her danger was ahead, but instinct alone wouldn't reveal the truth. She turned the knob slowly, the hinges groaning under the motion, and pushed the door open just a crack. A wave of warmth and a strange, metallic scent hit her immediately, like blood and smoke mixed, sharp and almost sickening. Inside, shadows danced, elongated and twisted, moving against the flickering candlelight as if they had a life of their own. She stepped inside cautiously, diary pressed to her chest, eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, every flicker. The silence was oppressive, heavy, waiting, pregnant with anticipation. Then she heard it, a soft shuffle from upstairs, slow, deliberate, like someone, or something, was moving with purpose. Lyra's stomach flipped. Her mother? Or him? The man with the silver ring? She couldn't tell. The hairs on her neck stood on end. Her heart raced uncontrollably, but her body moved on reflex, every step careful, deliberate, calculated. She ascended the stairs slowly, each creak loud enough to echo through the empty house. At the top, the hallway stretched before her, dimly lit, the flickering light casting grotesque shadows that seemed to lean toward her, whispering, watching, waiting. And there, at the very end, stood the figure she had dreaded most. Not her mother, not a shadow, not an empty promise. Him, the man with the silver ring, smiling again, calm, patient, like he had been expecting her, like every twist, every turn, every fear she had felt had been choreographed just for this moment. Lyra froze, clutching the diary as if it were a shield, her breath catching, legs trembling. But the only thing she could think, the only thought piercing through the panic, was that once she moved forward, nothing would ever be the same. Lyra's mind raced like a car with no brakes, heart hammering so loud she could hear it in her ears, but she knew she couldn't stop now, not after everything she had seen, not after her mother, not after her father's warnings and the diary that seemed to scream at her with every pulse. The man with the silver ring didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her with that unnerving calm, like a predator studying prey, and every instinct in her body told her to run, to throw herself back down the stairs, to disappear into the night and never come back. But there was something in his gaze, something almost hypnotic, pulling her forward like an invisible string she couldn't break. She gripped the diary so tight her knuckles went white, every muscle in her body tense, every nerve screaming danger, yet she stepped forward anyway, drawn by a mixture of fear and curiosity she couldn't control. The air felt heavier now, thick with anticipation, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, and even the faint flicker of candlelight seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. He finally spoke, his voice low, deliberate, cutting through the silence like a knife. You've come far, but this is only the beginning. Everything you know, everything you trust, is about to be tested. Your choices will determine not just your future, but the fate of those you love. Lyra's stomach churned, mind spinning with questions she didn't have answers for, but something in his tone warned her that hesitation could cost her everything. She forced herself to focus, to think, to push the panic aside, and asked, "What do you want from me?" His smile widened just slightly, almost mocking, almost amused, and he gestured toward a doorway at the end of the hall, a room shrouded in shadows, the candlelight flickering so violently it looked alive. "The answers you seek are in there," he said. "But be careful. Not all truths are safe, and some can destroy you completely." Lyra swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust, but she forced herself to take a step toward the door. Each step felt like a mile, the floorboards groaning. Beneath her, shadows stretching and twisting across the walls, whispering secrets she couldn't comprehend, and yet she kept moving, drawn by an unexplainable need to know, to see, understand. As she reached the doorway, she hesitated, feeling the weight of every decision she had made, every risk she had taken, pressing down on her chest. Her mother's blank stare, the diary, the river house, the man with the silver ring, it all collided into a storm of fear and urgency that made her knees weak. She glanced back once, half expecting him to vanish or for her mother to wake from whatever trance she was in, but they were still there, silent, watching. She pushed the door open slowly, the hinges creaking like a warning, and stepped inside. The room was dim, the air heavy with a metallic scent that made her stomach turn. Candlelight danced across the walls, illuminating objects that seemed both familiar and wrong. Old photographs with faces scratched out, papers with strange symbols she couldn't decipher, and in the center of it all, a small table with an envelope, sealed, resting like a promise or a trap. She approached it cautiously, hands trembling, and tore it open. Inside was a stack of letters, all addressed to her in her father's handwriting, each one telling a story she had never known, revealing secrets about her family, the river house, and the man with the silver ring that made her question everything she thought she knew. Her father had been hiding truths, lies interwoven with half-truths, protecting her from knowledge she wasn't supposed to have yet, but now it was all spilling into her hands like fire on dry grass. Her chest tightened, eyes scanning every word, trying to piece together decades of deception, betrayal, and choices that had led her here. Then, she felt it, a sudden chill, like someone had whispered her name directly into her soul, and she looked up. The man with the silver ring was closer now, shadowed in the flickering light, watching, waiting. "Do you understand now?" he asked, voice low, almost teasing. "Do you see why you were brought here? Do you see the consequences of choices made long before you existed?" Lyra's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she felt paralyzed, trapped between the knowledge in her father's letters and the presence of the man who seemed to hold the power of life and death over her. She wanted to run, scream, hide, but something inside her, a spark of defiance, a shred of courage, forced her to stand tall, diary pressed to her chest, letters trembling in her hands. I, I want answers, she whispered. I want to know everything. The man nodded slowly, almost approvingly, and took a step back, gesturing toward the river beyond the house. Then you'll have them, he said. But remember, once you cross that line, there's no turning back. Some truths will burn, some will bleed, and some will leave scars you'll carry forever. Are you ready for that? Lyra swallowed hard, racing, but she knew she had no choice. She nodded, stepping toward the door that led out to the river, her body tense, mind buzzing, and a strange calm washed over her. She had come this far. She couldn't stop now. Whatever waited on the other side, whatever dangers, secrets, and betrayals were hidden in the shadows of the river, she would face them. And with that, she moved forward, leaving the flickering candlelight of the river house behind, stepping into the darkness of the forest path, toward a future she couldn't yet see but knew would change everything. The forest beyond the river house seemed alive in ways Lyra had never noticed before, the trees swaying like they were breathing, leaves whispering secrets that brushed her ears and made her skin crawl. And every step she took on the muddy path felt like walking on the edge of some invisible cliff, each root and rock threatening to trip her into darkness. Yet she couldn't stop. She had to keep moving, had to follow the pull that the man with the silver ring had spoken of, a pull that seemed to guide her straight toward the unknown, toward danger, toward the truth she had been chasing ever since she opened her father's diary. The river beside her flowed silently, black and deep, reflecting the faint moonlight. Like a mirror to the sky, and every so often, she thought she saw shadows moving. Beneath the surface, dark shapes gliding just out of reach, as if whatever was in the water was alive and watching her progress, counting her steps, judging her courage. Her heart pounded, breaths coming in short, sharp bursts, and the diary pressed to her chest felt heavier with each step, as if it carried the weight of all the secrets, all the lies, all the history of her family, threatening to crush her under its truth. Somewhere ahead, a flicker of light appeared, tiny at first, then growing stronger, and she realized it was coming from a clearing where the river widened and the trees arched high, forming a natural tunnel that led straight to a structure she didn't recognize at first, then froze when she saw it. An old stone building, worn by years, ivy crawling up the walls. It was dark but faintly glowing, as if something inside had been waiting for her for decades. Her stomach flipped. This wasn't on any map. This wasn't in her father's diary. And yet, every instinct screamed that this was the place, that this was where the answers would finally confront her, whether she was ready or not. She approached cautiously, feet sinking in the soft mud, trying not to make a sound, but the night seemed to amplify every movement, every crunch of her shoes against the earth, as if the forest itself were alert, observing, waiting. The closer she got, the more she felt a strange energy humming through the air, a vibration that made the hairs on her arms stand tall, her neck stiffen, and a low, almost imperceptible hum fill her ears, like a warning or an invitation she couldn't decipher. The front door of the building was slightly ajar, the warm glow from inside spilling onto the ground, and she hesitated, hand hovering over the edge, the diary trembling slightly in her grip. For a moment, fear threatened to stop her, to turn her back to the river, the forest, the path she had fought so hard to follow. But then she thought of her mother, of the warnings in the diary, of the man with the silver ring, and she knew. She had no choice. This was the moment of truth, and running would solve nothing. She pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning, and stepped inside. The air smelled of old wood and faint smoke, thick with the scent of something she couldn't name, but that immediately set her nerves on edge. Candlelight flickered along the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and move on their own, and the room was filled with objects that made her stomach churn. Ancient books with cracked spines, scrolls tied with faded ribbons, jars filled with unidentifiable substances, and in the center, a large table covered in papers and maps, some hand-drawn, some typed, all marked with symbols and notes that made her head spin. She took a cautious step forward, diary clutched tightly, and then she saw it. A large book, open, glowing faintly on the table, its pages filled with handwriting she recognized immediately, her father's. Her pulse raced as she approached it, and as she read, a chill ran down her spine. The entries described things she couldn't comprehend: rituals, meetings, warnings, and a map of the forest, the river, and the building itself, marking locations she had already passed and others that she hadn't yet discovered. And then, she realized something terrifying. The man with the silver ring wasn't just waiting for her. He had orchestrated her entire journey, predicting her every step, guiding her through fear, through shadows, through the choices her father never wanted her to make, until she was standing exactly where he wanted her. A soft sound made her look up, and there he was, in the doorway, calm, composed, eyes glittering with an unreadable emotion, hands folded, as if he had been watching her approach the entire time. Lyra froze, feeling the weight of the moment crush her, knowing instinctively that whatever happened next would define not only her fate, but the fate of her mother, of her family, and possibly more than she could even imagine. His voice broke the silence, low and deliberate, echoing off the walls in a way that made the room feel impossibly large. You've come far, Lyra. Few have the courage to follow the path alone. Now, you must choose, accept the truth, or turn back and remain in ignorance forever. But know this: some truths burn, and some truths will leave scars you can never heal. She swallowed, every nerve screaming, every instinct urging flight. But a strange calm settled over her as she gripped her father's diary tighter, stepped closer to the glowing book, and whispered, almost to herself, "I'm ready." Lyra's hand hovered over the glowing book, fingers trembling as if the slightest touch could ignite a firestorm of secrets, and she could feel the weight of every choice, every lie, every hidden truth pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe, making her heart race like a drum in a war zone. But she forced herself to steady, telling herself she had come too far to turn back now. That fear was a cage, and the only way forward was through. And with a deep, shaky breath, she opened the pages, revealing diagrams, notes, and writings that twisted her mind. Descriptions of events and people she had never known, symbols that seemed alive, moving on the page when she wasn't looking, and most importantly, references to the man with the silver ring, his presence encoded in every word as if her father had known he would come, had known this moment would arrive, and had left these clues as a warning, a map, and maybe even a test all in one. She read faster, desperation sharpening her eyes, her pulse thudding so loudly it echoed in the silent room, until a name caught her attention, written over and over with circles and arrows pointing outward. Her mother, her name, her life, entangled in a web she had never realized existed, and Lyra felt bile rise in her throat as the realization hit that her mother's trance, her blank stare, even the path that led her here, had all been orchestrated, manipulated, designed to bring Lyra to this exact spot, to force a confrontation she wasn't ready for but couldn't escape. A sudden movement in the shadows made her spin around, diary clutched to her chest, and there he was, the man with the silver ring, closer than she expected, eyes glinting, lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his cold gaze, hands behind his back, exuding control, power, and menace all at once. And she understood instantly that he wasn't just a man, he was a force, a key player in events that had been building long before she was born, and now she had been thrust into the center of it all. "You've read enough to know the stakes," he said, voice smooth, dangerous, echoing against the stone walls, making her skin crawl, and she nodded, unable to speak, unable to stop the tremor in her legs, and yet somehow rooted in place by fear, curiosity, and the pull of destiny she could neither deny nor escape. He stepped closer, the faint sound of his boots on the floorboards louder than it should have been, and the glow of the book reflected in his eyes, making them look almost supernatural, almost inhuman. And Lyra realized that crossing this threshold, touching this knowledge, facing him directly, was going to change everything she thought she knew about her life, her family, and herself. Everything you've been told, everything you've believed, is only half the story, he continued, voice low, deliberate, almost hypnotic. And half-truths are the deadliest kind because they make you think you understand when you don't. You've come here for answers, but are you ready to face the cost? Lyra's throat was dry, words caught like thorns, but she nodded again, tighter this time, pressing the diary and letters to her chest as if they could shield her from what was coming. And then he did something unexpected. He gestured toward the table, the glowing book, and motioned for her to step closer. Hesitation tore at her, every instinct screaming to flee, but she stepped forward, feet dragging slightly on the worn floor, heart hammering, mind racing. And as her fingers brushed the edge of the book, the room seemed to shift, shadows stretching taller, candlelight flickering violently, and a sudden gust of wind swept through the broken windows, carrying whispers, names, secrets she could almost hear but not fully understand, and the air became thick, heavy, oppressive, as if the room itself was alive and waiting for her next move. She glanced at him, but he didn't speak, just watched, silent, patient, terrifyingly calm, and she realized that every second here was a test, every heartbeat a choice, every glance a challenge she couldn't ignore. Her eyes returned to the book, the glowing pages filled with knowledge, power, secrets, and lies, and she understood that once she read, she couldn't unsee anything, couldn't undo any of the revelations, couldn't escape the truth no matter how horrifying it might be. And in that moment, fear, dread, determination, and a strange, reckless courage collided inside her, making her pulse race, fingers shake, and breath hitch, because she absolutely knew that turning away now wasn't an option, that running wasn't a choice, and that whatever waited on the other side of the knowledge in those pages, she would face it, consequences, scars, and all, because she had already come too far to look back, already been pulled too deep into a world of secrets, lies, and shadows orchestrated by the man with the silver ring, whose smile never faltered, whose patience never broke, and whose plans, she realized, had just begun to unfold, leaving her standing at the edge of the unknown, heart in her throat, mind spinning, ready or not to confront the darkness she had been led to, and knowing that from this moment forward, nothing in her life would ever be the same. Lyra's fingers hovered over the glowing pages, her pulse racing like a jackhammer in her chest, every nerve screaming danger, yet her curiosity pushed her forward, drawing her closer to secrets she didn't fully understand but felt she had to confront. And as she began to read, the room seemed to close in, shadows stretching taller, candlelight flickering violently across the walls, making the objects around her appear distorted and almost alive, the jars and old books seeming to watch her with silent intent, while the man with the silver ring remained in the doorway, calm, observing his presence, a constant weight pressing down on her, reminding her that nothing here was by chance, and every detail, every move she had made to get here, had been carefully orchestrated to lead her to this exact moment. The pages revealed her father's life in ways she had never imagined, stories of betrayal, hidden alliances, warnings about people she trusted, and the chilling truth that the man in front of her was more than a stranger. He was part of her family's hidden history, intertwined with their past decisions, their sins, and their most guarded secrets. Her mother's trance, the diary, the river house, every warning. It all clicked together into a horrifying puzzle she had no idea existed, and each revelation felt like a punch to the gut, twisting her insides with fear and disbelief. Yet something in her refused to turn away, refused to let ignorance shield her from the truth. She read about deals made in shadows, promises broken, sacrifices demanded, and the man with the silver ring's role as both protector and manipulator, guiding events while remaining unseen, a phantom controlling the outcome like a chess master moving pieces on a board she hadn't even realized existed. Her hands shook violently, diary clutched tight, letters spilling onto the floor as she tried to absorb everything, and the air around her seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the house itself were waiting for her reaction, for the decision she was about to make. knowing that once she acted, there would be no turning back. She glanced up, locking eyes with the man, whose expression was unreadable but carried the weight of centuries, patience, and something darker, something dangerous. And for a moment, she felt as if she were staring into the very heart of inevitability, realizing that everything she had been through, every fear, every step, every choice, had been leading to this confrontation. "Do you understand the cost of knowledge?" he asked, voice low, resonating in the room like a warning bell. "Once you see, once you know, there is no undoing it. The path forward is yours, but the consequences are not." Lyra's throat went dry, mind spinning, but she straightened her shoulders, pressing the diary and letters to her chest like armor, and whispered, "I understand. I'll face it." He nodded slowly, almost approvingly, stepping aside and gesturing toward a narrow doorway she hadn't noticed before, a passage leading downward into darkness, cold stone walls reflecting the faint glow from her candles. And she realized instinctively that whatever awaited her there was the next test, the heart of the secrets, and maybe even the key to understanding her family's tangled history. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and resolve as she approached, each step heavy, deliberate, echoing through the stone corridor, the shadows twisting around her like living entities, murmuring faintly, voices of the past or illusions she couldn't identify. And yet she pressed on, refusing to stop, refusing to flee, driven by a desperate need to know, to confront, to survive. As she descended, the air grew colder, damper, carrying scents of earth, decay, and something metallic, sharp, unfamiliar, and every step forward felt like crossing a line from which she could never return. At the bottom, the passage opened into a cavernous chamber, vast and shadowed, with a single pool of water in the center reflecting a pale light from nowhere. And across it, the man with the silver ring waited, hands empty, expression calm, as if challenging her to cross, to face whatever lay beyond the water. And she understood immediately. This was it, the ultimate choice, the culmination of everything. The diary, the letters, her mother, her father's warnings, the river house, the forest, all leading to this single moment of truth. Fear clawed at her, icy and relentless, but a flicker of courage, stubborn and wild, ignited in her chest, and she stepped forward, dipping a toe into the pool, the water cold and shocking, yet electrifying, sending a jolt through her body that sharpened her senses, made every shadow, every flicker of light, every heartbeat feel amplified, and she realized that this was more than a physical test. This was mental, emotional, spiritual, a trial that would expose her to truths that could either destroy her or set her free. The man watched silently, every movement, deliberate, letting her take the first steps, letting her test her courage. And Lyra understood that she had been chosen for this, that fate had been steering her, shaping her, molding her through fear, through confusion, through the strange labyrinth of her family's secrets, to prepare her for the confrontation that was inevitable, unavoidable, and irreversible. With the diary pressed to her chest and a steadying breath, she waded deeper into the water, every step heavier than the last, until she reached the center, where the glow from some unknown source illuminated a pedestal, ancient, worn, and waiting, and she realized that whatever lay upon it would change everything she knew about her family, her past, her present, and her future, and there was no turning back, only forward. Into the heart of truth and consequence, Lyra's eyes locked on the pedestal in the center of the pool, the pale glow illuminating something that made her stomach twist with anticipation and dread, a small box, ancient, carved with symbols that seemed to shimmer and shift as if alive, whispering secrets she couldn't understand yet somehow recognized. And she realized with a jolt that this was what her father's diary had been hinting at all along, the heart of the mystery, the core of every choice and every shadow she had encountered since the river house. And the man with the silver ring stood patiently across the pool, calm, unyielding, like a guardian of fate himself, letting her make the first move, testing her resolve and every instinct. Screamed at her to stop, turn back, but something deeper, a fire fueled by years of questions, fear, and determination, pushed her forward. She stepped fully into the icy water, the chill cutting through her like knives, making her gasp and shiver violently. Yet she pressed on, every step deliberate, feeling the pull of destiny, the weight of the diary and letters she clutched to her chest, the knowledge that once she touched the box, everything would change forever. And there was no turning back. The water lapped at her knees, then thighs, cold, and the pedestal seemed impossibly distant. But she kept moving, pushed forward by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and stubborn courage that refused to let her falter. And as she drew near, she noticed the symbols on the box pulsing faintly, glowing brighter with each heartbeat, as if reacting to her presence, as if aware of her intentions, alive in a way that made her heart pound faster. She reached out, trembling fingers brushing the carved wood, and a shock ran through her body, like electricity dancing over her skin, sharp and invigorating, and the box slowly creaked open, revealing something she never imagined. Inside, layers of documents, letters, and a small key, glimmering faintly, accompanied by a folded note in handwriting she immediately recognized, her father's. The note read like a confession and a warning, explaining secrets hidden for decades, choices made to protect her, sacrifices she had never known, and the truth about the man with the silver ring, his connection to her family, and the path that had led her here. And Lyra felt a wave of emotions crash over her. Fear, relief, anger, confusion, and an unshakable sense of destiny all at once, like a storm she couldn't escape. She read the note carefully, absorbing every word, realizing that her father had left these instructions knowing she would face the trials, knowing she would confront the man, knowing that her courage and choices would determine the outcome not only for herself, but for her mother, for her family, and perhaps for generations beyond. And the responsibility weighed on her like a mountain, heavy, suffocating, yet strangely empowering, making her aware of the power she had inherited, the resilience she had developed, and the role she now had to play. The man with the silver ring stepped closer, his presence calm but imposing, and said, voice low and deliberate, "Now you understand. You've seen the threads that bind you, the consequences of ignorance, and the power of knowledge. The choice is yours. Use it wisely, or let it destroy everything you love." Lyra's hands shook as she folded the note and tucked it carefully into the diary, feeling the gravity of the situation pressing down. Yet her mind sharpened, focus crystal clear despite the fear that lingered in her chest, and she realized she had to act. That hesitation could cost her. That courage now was more important than ever. She looked up at the man, eyes blazing with determination, and said, "I'm ready. Show me the next step. I'll face whatever comes." He nodded slowly, almost approvingly, stepping aside and pointing toward a narrow passage beneath the pedestal, hidden in shadows, descending into darkness. And Lyra understood instinctively that this path would test her further, confront her with more truths, more challenges, more shadows she hadn't yet imagined. And yet the pull to move forward, to uncover every secret, to confront every fear, was irresistible. She stepped carefully, water sloshing around her calves, diary clutched tightly, key in hand, descending into the darkness below, and with each step, the air grew colder, heavier, the shadows twisting into shapes that seemed to watch her every move, murmuring faintly in a language she couldn't understand but somehow felt in her bones. And the anticipation became almost unbearable, her heart hammering with every step closer to the unknown, knowing that whatever awaited her would change everything, forever, and there would be no turning back, only forward into truth, consequence, and revelation. Lyra descended into the darkness beneath the pedestal, the cold air wrapping around her. Like a shroud, every step echoing off the stone walls, shadows twisting unnaturally with the flicker of faint light from somewhere deep within, and she could feel the weight of the diary and letters pressing against her chest as if they were alive, urging her onward, warning her, guiding her, while the key in her hand pulsed faintly, almost like it recognized her touch, like it belonged to her and no one else. And she realized that this path she had chosen was irreversible, that each movement carried consequences she couldn't yet comprehend, yet she couldn't stop now, couldn't hesitate, because Every choice she had made since the river house had been leading her here, to this underground chamber, to the confrontation that would define everything she had ever known. The passage narrowed, forcing her to squeeze through damp stone walls, water dripping from unseen cracks above, splashing into shallow puddles at her feet, and the farther she went, the heavier the air became, thick with the scent of earth, smoke, and something metallic, something that made her stomach churn and hair stand on end, like the presence of secrets too dark to speak. Every step forward was like walking on a tightrope over an abyss, her mind racing with thoughts of her mother, her father, the man with the silver ring, and the countless choices, mistakes, and lies that had guided her here. And yet the pull of the unknown, the promise of answers, burned hotter than fear, driving her deeper into the shadows. The walls opened up suddenly into a cavern larger than she could have imagined, high ceilings lost in darkness, the faint glow of phosphorescent markings illuminating intricate symbols etched into the walls, strange diagrams she couldn't comprehend, and in the center of the cavern, a massive stone altar sat, draped in shadows, the faint light catching something metallic atop it that glimmered like it was alive. And Lyra's breath caught as she realized she had reached the heart of whatever secrets had been orchestrating her life. The man with the silver ring appeared again, stepping silently from the shadows, his eyes glittering, hands empty, expression calm yet impossibly commanding. And she understood instinctively that this was the true test, the confrontation her father had warned her about, the place where courage, knowledge, and consequence collided, and where she would either triumph or be consumed by the darkness she had chased for so long. "You've made it this far," he said, voice low, deliberate, echoing off the stone walls, making the cavern feel alive with his words. "But the hardest part begins now. What lies before you is the culmination of every secret, every betrayal, every truth you've uncovered. One choice now will define everything." Lyra's hands shook, the diary clutched tightly, the key pressing into her palm, and she took a cautious step forward, studying the altar, the glint of metal atop it, the intricate carvings that seemed to shift when she blinked. And she realized that this was more than a test of courage. It was a test of understanding, of wisdom, of confronting not just the man with the silver ring, but herself, her fears, her past, and her family's darkest truths. She glanced at him, and his gaze seemed to pierce through her, calm yet unyielding, and she knew that hesitation, doubt, or fear now would cost her everything, that only by stepping forward and facing the truth head-on could she hope to emerge unbroken. Heart hammering, breath shallow, she advanced to the altar, feeling the vibrations of the cavern, the pull of the key in her hand, the whispers of unseen voices brushing against her ears, naming her, testing her, warning her, urging her onward, and she pressed her hand to the metallic object atop the stone, feeling a shock of energy surge through her, cold, sharp, electric, connecting her to centuries of secrets, to her father's warnings, to the man with the silver ring, to her own destiny in ways she didn't yet understand but could feel deep in her bones. The glow around the object intensified, illuminating every corner of the cavern, every symbol, every shadow, and Lyra realized that knowledge, power, and danger were intertwined, inseparable, and that the moment she made her next move, the consequences would ripple through her life, her family, and the hidden world she had been thrust into, and there would be no turning back, no escape, only forward into the truth, into revelation, and into the heart of what she had been chasing since the river house. Her mind raced, stomach twisting, heart pounding, yet a strange calm settled over her as she steadied her hand, key ready, diary pressed to her chest, and whispered, "I'm ready," because whatever awaited her beyond this point, she would face it head on. Consequences, fear, and all, and nothing, not the shadows, not the secrets, not the man with the silver ring, would stop her from uncovering the truth. That Lyra's fingers closed around the metallic object atop the altar, the energy surging through her like lightning striking bone, and her mind reeled as visions, whispers, and fragmented memories collided, forcing her to understand things she wasn't ready for yet, truths her father had tried to shield her from, the choices he had made, the sacrifices, the betrayals, and the way the man with the silver ring had been a shadow in her family's history for longer than she could imagine, orchestrating, testing, waiting, and now she was the final piece in a chain of events stretching back decades, a link connecting past mistakes to present consequences, and the weight of it pressed down on her chest like a boulder. But she couldn't let it crush her, couldn't let it freeze her in place, because the key in her hand, the diary, the letters, everything she had endured, had prepared her for this moment, and she had to act or risk losing everything she had fought for. The glow from the object intensified, bathing the cavern in a surreal light that danced across the walls, illuminating the symbols and diagrams in ways that made them seem alive, writhing and shifting with every heartbeat. And Lyra realized that this wasn't just a physical place, a hidden chamber. It was a test of mind, spirit, and heart, a crucible designed to reveal who she truly was and whether she could face the truth without breaking. The man with the silver ring stepped closer, his presence calm but commanding, shadows stretching along the walls, voice low and deliberate, echoing in the cavern. You see now, don't you? Every choice, every step, every lie, every truth has led you here. What you do next will determine the course of your family, your life, and the threads of destiny intertwined with it. You have courage, yes, but courage alone isn't enough. Understanding is required, and only through comprehension can you wield the power you've uncovered without being destroyed by it. Lyra swallowed hard, mind spinning, heartbeat racing, but she pressed forward, stepping fully onto the altar platform, the key warm in her hand, and she studied the metallic object closer, intricate carvings glowing, symbols pulsing faintly, almost alive, as if aware of her presence, acknowledging her determination, and she realized that this was more than a key, more than a tool. It was a bridge between ignorance and knowledge, past and present, fear and power, a bridge she had to cross fully or risk being trapped in shadows forever. Her hands shook, yet she held steady, diary and letters clutched to her chest, and she whispered, almost to herself, I'm ready. Knowing that this affirmation wasn't just for the man with the silver ring, but for herself, her mother, her father's legacy, and the truth she had been chasing since the river house, since the diary, since the moment her life had cracked open into chaos. She placed the key into a slot on the metallic object, and the moment it clicked into place, the cavern shifted, walls seemed to ripple, symbols pulsed brighter, shadows twisted into new shapes, and a low hum filled the air, vibrating through her bones, through her mind, through her very soul, connecting her to the hidden threads of her family's past, the secrets her father had buried, the manipulations of the man who had been waiting all this time, and the consequences of choices she hadn't yet made. The water surrounding the altar shimmered, reflecting visions of her mother, her father, herself at younger ages, moments she had forgotten, moments she had never known, and she realized with a jolt that the cavern, the altar, the key, and the metallic object weren't just about knowledge. They were about understanding, reconciliation, and facing truths that could heal or destroy, depending on her decisions now. The man with the silver ring's gaze didn't waver, calm and unyielding, and he said, voice echoing and reverberating in the vast chamber, now you have the tools, the knowledge, and the understanding. But remember, understanding is only the beginning. You must act, or all this will remain a prison of shadows and half-truths. Lyra's chest tightened with anticipation and fear, yet a strange clarity washed over her, the chaos in her mind settling into a sharp focus. And she knew what she had to do. Face the consequences, confront the truths, and make choices that would define not only her fate, but the future of her family and everything tied to them. With steady hands, she lifted the metallic object, feeling the energy pulse through her, linking her, the key, the diary, and the letters into a chain of understanding that stretched back generations. And she stepped back from the altar, taking a deep, deliberate breath, ready to move forward, ready to confront whatever waited in the shadows, ready to finally control her destiny rather than be controlled by the past. Because she had come too far, faced too much, and nothing, including fear, shadows, or the man with the silver ring, would stop her from seeing this through to the end. Lyra stepped back from the altar, the metallic object glowing in her hands, energy coursing through her like fire and ice at once, and the cavern seemed to respond to her presence, walls pulsing with light, shadows twisting and stretching, whispering in languages she didn't recognize but somehow understood in the marrow of her bones, and she realized that every fear, every doubt, every misstep that had haunted her since the river house, since the diary, since the moment she had realized her life was unraveling, had led her to this convergence, this intersection of destiny, choice, and truth, and she knew in the deepest part of herself that she could not turn back, could not falter, because everything she had uncovered, everything she had fought for, depended on the next move she made. The man with the silver ring remained silent, watching, his expression unreadable, but his presence alone carried weight, authority, and a promise that this was the defining moment, the point where courage would either triumph or crumble, and Lyra felt the diary end. Letters pressing against her chest, as if reminding her of the journey, of her father's warnings, of the countless steps she had taken through fear, shadow, and confusion, and she knew that she was ready, or as ready as anyone could be when facing a legacy of secrets and a future uncharted. She took a cautious step forward, the water around the altar sloshing faintly, reflecting the flickering glow of the metallic object and the faint light from the cavern walls, and every step felt like crossing invisible lines of fate, boundaries she couldn't see but could feel with every nerve, every heartbeat, every shiver that ran down her spine, and she pressed onward, driven by the determination to confront the truth, to embrace the knowledge, and to face the man who had haunted her. Family shadows for decades. Her fingers traced the carvings on the metallic object, symbols pulsing beneath her touch as if alive, whispering secrets she couldn't articulate, and she realized that this object wasn't merely a key or a tool. It was a bridge between the past, the present, and what was yet to come, a bridge she had to cross with precision, courage, and clarity, because one misstep could unravel everything, every truth, every revelation, every connection she had fought to uncover. The cavern seemed to tighten around her, shadows folding in, light pulsing, the hum growing louder, vibrating through her bones and skull, forcing her to steady herself, to focus, to summon every ounce of strength and will she possessed, and she felt her mind expanding, connecting dots she hadn't seen before, understanding the orchestration of events, the delicate balance of lies and truth, the manipulations of the man with the silver ring, and the fragile yet powerful thread that her father had woven through letters, diary entries, and warnings, leaving her breadcrumbs to follow to this very place. She glanced at him, and for a fleeting moment, his calm exterior wavered just slightly, revealing a hint of anticipation, almost admiration, as if he recognized her resolve, her courage, her unwillingness to bend or break under the weight of destiny, and he said, voice low but carrying through the cavern, "You understand now that knowledge is both weapon and shield, that power without comprehension is destruction, that choices are more dangerous than lies, and that courage alone is never enough. You must act with wisdom, with clarity, and with heart, or everything will fall apart." Lyra's breath caught, mind spinning, yet clarity sharpened her senses, and she nodded, pressing the diary to her chest, key in one hand, metallic object in the other, energy humming through her, connecting her to generations of secrets, decisions, sacrifices, and courage, and she realized that this was her moment to step fully into her destiny, to confront what lay ahead, to face the consequences, and to claim control over the chaos that had consumed her family for decades. With careful steps, she moved closer to the center of the altar, letting the energy of the metallic object flow through her, feeling the vibrations of the cavern, the whispers of the shadows, the unseen presence of forces she could barely comprehend, yet somehow intuitively understood, and she knew that whatever she did next would ripple outward, affecting not just her, but her mother, her father's legacy, and everything tied to the river house, the diary, and the secrets of the man with the silver ring, and there would be no turning back once the choice was made. Heart hammering, pulse racing, every muscle tensed, she whispered, "I'm ready," fully aware that this wasn't just about courage or survival, but about confronting the culmination of all truths, lies, and consequences she had encountered, embracing her role as the one who would finally face the heart of the mystery, and stepping fully into the destiny that had been orchestrated for her long before she was born. Lyra stepped fully onto the center of the altar, metallic object glowing fiercely in her hands, energy vibrating through her entire body, and the cavern responded as if alive, walls pulsing, shadows twisting, whispers circling around her, names, warnings, encouragements, fragments of the past and future blending into a storm of sensation that both terrified and exhilarated her, and she realized that every step, every choice, every fear and moment of courage that had brought her here was leading to a single truth. She could no longer run from the shadows of her family, from the manipulations of the man with the silver ring, from the consequences of past mistakes, and from the destiny that demanded she take action now, fully and without hesitation. Her pulse hammered in her ears, breath coming shallow and fast, hands trembling slightly, yet clarity sharpened her senses, connecting the diary, the letters, the key, and the metallic object into a coherent whole, revealing patterns, secrets, and consequences she had only glimpsed before, and for the first time, she understood the full weight of what she was about to face, the full magnitude of the truth, and the immense responsibility now resting squarely on her shoulders. The man with the silver ring stepped closer, silent yet commanding, eyes glinting in the pulsating light, and he said softly, deliberately, "This is the moment where courage meets destiny, where knowledge meets action, and where choices are irreversible. Whatever happens next will define not just your life, but the legacy of your family, and the shadows you followed will either bow to your understanding or consume everything you hold dear." Lyra swallowed, heart racing. Yet a strange calm settled over her as she lifted the metallic object higher, feeling the energy respond to her intent, to her determination, to her refusal to be broken by fear or uncertainty, and she pressed it firmly against the pedestal, key sliding into the corresponding slot, and a surge of light exploded outward, bathing the cavern in brilliance that made shadows flee, symbols shift, and whispers crescendo into a chorus of revelation and warning that shook her to the core. The water surrounding the altar glimmered like molten silver, reflecting visions of her mother, her father, herself at pivotal moments, every hidden secret, every choice, every lie and truth converging into a tapestry that she could finally see, finally understand, and she felt a weight lift from her chest, even as responsibility pressed harder than ever, because she knew that knowledge alone was not enough. Action was required, and the energy flowing through her demanded clarity, courage, and heart in equal measure. With steady hands, she lifted the glowing object, turning it slowly, feeling the hum resonate through her body, mind, and soul, and she realized that this moment was about more than her. It was about undoing the shadows, confronting the manipulations, reclaiming the legacy her father had fought to protect, and choosing a path forward where secrets became strength, knowledge became power, and courage became her shield against destruction. The man with the silver ring remained a silent witness, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos of energy and revelation swirling around her. And as she focused, aligning the metallic object with the altar, a doorway of light opened within the cavern, revealing another chamber, faintly glowing, filled with the tools, knowledge, and remnants of her family's past that she would now command and understand. And she stepped forward without hesitation, fully embracing the role fate had carved for her, fully ready to confront, control, and transform what had once threatened to destroy everything she loved. The whispers faded into clarity, the shadows receded, and for the first time, Lyra felt an unshakable connection to her family, to her own courage, to the intricate tapestry of choices, sacrifices, and secrets that had shaped her life, and she realized that she was not just a participant in this story. She was its master, its guardian, and its final arbiter, wielding knowledge, understanding, and action in balance, aware that the past could no longer control her and that her decisions would defined the present and future alike. She exhaled deeply, letting the diary and letters settle against her chest, key still in hand, metallic object glowing faintly but steadily. Energy harmonized, and she turned to the man with the silver ring, who finally nodded, a hint of approval and relief in his eyes, acknowledging that she had passed the trials, embraced her destiny, and proven that courage, understanding, and heart could overcome fear, manipulation, and shadows that had loomed for generations. And in that moment, Lyra felt an indescribable sense of power, clarity, and peace, knowing that she had reclaimed her life, her family's legacy, and her own strength, and that from this day forward, she would walk forward not as a victim of secrets, lies, or shadows, but as the one who controlled them, guided them, and ensured that the mistakes of the past would never define the future, because she had faced the ultimate truth, embraced the consequences, and emerged unbroken, triumphant, and ready to write the next chapter of her story with courage, wisdom, and heart fully intact. Thanks for watching.